Oh, me dearios, it's David McGillivray here. And this is, little did you know, is a chat show in which I talk to people I find interesting, and I hope you agree. Now, today is going to be a cathartic episode. Well, not for you, for me, because I will be recalling my formative years. Yes, it was 1964, I was 17, and every Friday I would rush home from Gateway Film Studios to catch Ready, Steady, Go. It was a pop show that was ITV's rival to Top of the Pops, and I preferred it. And one Friday, one of the presenters, it wasn't Kathy McGowan, it was Michael Aldred, thereby hangs a tale.
Indeed.
He introduced a new singer who was going to be miming to her first release. Yes, it's my guest. The next day, I went out and bought that record, and it's called To Know Him Is to Love Him. My guest is still singing, but she's still doing so much more besides, and we're going to be talking about all that. I can only be referring to the very wonderful Cleo Sylvestre.
Oh, you're too kind.
Oh, Cleo, I'm not, as you'll find during this interview. Cleo, why are we here outside the National Theatre on London's South Bank?
Because I'm currently appearing in Under Milk Wood with Michael Sheen, Sian Phillips, and a wonderful, wonderful bunch of Welsh actors.
A wonderful cast.
Yeah.
Alas,
yeah.
by the time this goes out, you'll have closed.
Indeed, but we are filming it tomorrow.
Oh,
yeah.
in that case,
yeah.
no problem. We're going to be talking about so much today, and there's far too much for 45 minutes. So we're going to carry on the conversation, because you've had such a rich, full life, on Patreon. Now, Patreon subscribers will know that as soon as we've finished, you can join us there. And if you're not a subscriber, here's the link right there. You can come and join the gang. You won't regret it. Oh, let me get my notes out here. They're hiding a few surprises for Cleo, which I don't want her to see. Cleo, you've written about your mother online, and you can find this very easily, and it's really worth reading, because Cleo's a great writer as well as an actor. I want to know how long it took you to research all that information about your mother.
Well, it varied actually, because my daughter was quite instrumental in, finding out her story. And in fact, it was only 2 weeks before she died that my mother told me the whole her life story. I mean, I think with one's parents, you often don't ask the questions, and then you think after they've died, you think, oh my God, why didn't I ask her this? Why didn't I ask her that? But she was basically mixed race, brought up in Yorkshire, from a white Yorkshire mum who was a showgirl, and we don't know the dad, but he obviously was either American, African, but he obviously, wasn't white English. So my mother was brought up in a home, and she, as I said, she told me this just before she died, and she said, I never told you before because I didn't want you to feel sorry for me. So Zoe, basically my daughter, one of my daughters, started doing a bit of research, and we found all the notes from the children's home, and it was quite emotional, actually. Yeah.
You are a representative of probably the third generation in show business.
Probably am, actually.
Because your grandmother was in the business as well.
She was a hoofer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, you know full well. But what interested me was that your mother was a dancer at a club called the Shim Sham, which was in Wardour Street in London, Soho, just over the river there. The Shim Sham became better known under another name. Do you know what that name was?
No, I don't actually.
Really?
No.
You'll know it.
Tell me.
It was the Flamingo.
Oh, that's where oh my God. How amazing. So
And you didn't know.
I didn't know when I used to go down the Flamingo to watch the Stones and Georgie Fame and all those.
All true.
Oh my God.
That
and
is
the
where
Gunnell Brothers.
your
Yeah.
mother danced.
Oh my God, that is incredible.
It's such a thrill to be able to tell you that.
Thank you.
I thought you would have known.
No, because I've often thought I must try and find out where the Shim Sham was. And you've gone and done it. Fantastic.
So you used to go to the Flamingo. What was it like?
Well, when I used to go, it was mostly Americans, servicemen used to go down there, particularly for Georgie Fame. But I remember one night going down there when the Stones were playing, because they started to have a sort of gig there, and I think there were more in the band than there were. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
very
yeah.
early days.
Very, very early days. Yeah. Yeah. And I used to go to all-nighters there.
All what went on?
All-nighters, just music all night long, and then you'd stagger home. They'd be sort of Saturday night to Sunday morning, and then
Well, you see, I thought that all-nighters are a modern thing, but no, you were at it. What was this in the 60s?
Yeah, 63, 64. Yeah.
How did you keep going all night, Cleo?
Actually, on adrenaline. I mean, I was never into drugs, seriously. And I was very young and pure in those days, so it was the youth.
Oh,
Yeah.
you were a student of Italia Conti, well-known stage school.
Yeah.
And basically, we're here today because I happen to be watching a TV station called Talking Pictures, which comes up quite regularly on this series.
Oh, yeah.
And what should be showing but a film called Johnny on the Run. So I got in touch with Cleo, wondering if she remembered it. It was your first film, 1953. You were 8.
Yeah.
Do you remember doing it?
I do indeed, and I remember it was. I had a chaperone, and it's the first time I'd been away from my mum, and we flew up to. Can't remember where we flew to, but I know we stopped off at Manchester because the plane in those days, I don't think it could. Well, it needed to be refuel or something.
It was the old days.
It was the old
yes.
days.
I think it was done in Liverpool, wasn't it?
No. It was filmed up in Lockenhead, in Scotland.
Oh yes, sorry.
Which was absolutely my first, and I've loved Scotland ever since. My first introduction to Scotland, and it was beautiful. This lovely, lovely place, on a loch, and it was directed by a very young director called Lewis Gilbert.
Yes.
Who went on to become very well known indeed.
He did
Educating Rita.
James Bond.
Carve Her Name with Pride. Everything. Yeah.
And what was he like directing you?
Well, I mean, it was like a family, really. I mean, I don't really remember any harsh words, and
Good.
it was a very friendly, safe atmosphere. But yeah.
Nice story about a Polish boy who comes to the UK and is befriended by a lot of children, including yourself.
Yes.
So it's all about being nice to people from other countries.
Exactly. Yeah.
So unusual for its day.
It was actually, yeah. And
Did you ever see that boy again?
no, one of them actually, there was a guy in it who called Louis Alexander, whose mother was an Austrian, I think, countess.
Oh my.
and she used to send her Rolls Royce round to Drummond Street, and I think she said she wanted us to sort of get married when I was older.
Oh yes.
I think she was trying. I don't know why, but I don't know what happened to her or him actually.
Well, I know what happened to him. I mean, he would have been just a bit older than you at that time, so he may have been about 10 or 11.
Yeah.
And so I did look him up. He stayed in this country. That was his first film, like you.
Yeah.
And then he went to RADA.
Oh, really?
So he studied in this country.
Yeah.
And then completely disappeared. I don't know what happened to him after that, but he never worked in this country again.
Really? Yeah. Yeah. And I also, another thing I remember from that film was I had a lifelong love of cats, and my first kittens I got, one day we were filming and there was a fisherman, a guy came along with a bag, a canvas bag, and this bag was moving.
Oh, this doesn't sound good.
No, it's a nasty story. He put it in the boat and rowed out to the lock and chucked it over.
Oh, no.
And I remember saying to my chaperone, "What's he doing?" And I knew there were kittens in there. And she, obviously tried to fob me off and everything. But I knew. But in the laundry of the hotel, there were some semi-feral kittens. And I took 2 of them home, back to London I put them in the sick bag of the aeroplane, and didn't prepare, because in those days, you weren't on the phone all the time or anything. And so I arrived at wherever, I can't remember which airport we went from, but I arrived there with these 2 kittens as a present to my mum, and one of them lived quite late. The other one, I'm afraid, got run over. Yeah.
But that was the start of your relationship with cats.
Yeah.
How lovely.
Yeah.
I'm going to leap now to 1964. So what happened was that I went and bought the record, and okay.
Oh my God.
Here it is. Okay. Have you got a copy yourself?
I have.
You have? Oh,
Yeah.
I thought you might. Well, I still play it, Cleo, and now I want the whole history. So, this is the story I remember. And I have to say that it's the only story that you're going to get, because this episode of Ready, Steady, Go has been wiped as well.
I know.
There's no record of you singing that song.
Yeah.
And I remember distinctly, though, what happened. And this is the story. Michael Aldridge said, a few weeks ago, there was a girl in the audience watching the show, and after it had finished, the producer went up to her and said, "Do you sing?" And she said yes. And now here she is. Is that story true? Is that what happened?
No.
Oh, I see. I knew you were going to say that, but I've believed that for, let's do the maths. Is this coming up for 60 years?
Sorry to disillusion you. Oh.
What is the true story, Cleo?
The true story is that I used to go, when the Marquee was in Oxford Street.
Wardour Street.
No, it was first of all, it started in Oxford Street,
okay.
where Marks and Sparks is, just near Oxford Circus. So it started there, and somehow I found out that they were having a Thursday night rhythm and blues night. I didn't really know anything about rhythm and blues, but thought it sounded great. So I went along there, and somebody called Alexis Corner was playing, right, was brilliant.
Yes.
So, and he had all these young musicians. I mean, they all used to get up there and sing. And so I met Mick.
Jagger?
Yeah. And
he was what, in the audience?
He used to get up occasionally and sing. Yeah. And one night Mick said to me, "Oh, I'm forming, Brian and I, we're forming a band.
Oh my God.
And we're looking for some backing singers, some girls sing, because it was all the rage in America, to have sort of like
like the Crystals.
The Crystals and the Ronettes and
Yes.
everything. Yeah. So you have to remember that it was such a long time ago that I'd probably be the only black person down the club, which is hard to imagine now. And I did have a friend who, like me, was a mixture, born in England. Her father was African and her mother was mixed race from Newcastle, called Jean. Anyway, so I said to Jean, so we went along to rehearsals. I said to Jean, "Can you sing?" Blah blah blah. We went along to rehearsals near World's End, and Jean was absolutely tone deaf. Absolutely tone deaf. So that put an end to that. But I used to sort of practice duets with Mick, but we never actually.
So you were rehearsing for what became the Rolling Stones?
Yeah.
I didn't know any of this. Okay.
Right,
So
yeah.
how did you come to make this record?
Again, it was quite random. One day, by then they had Andrew Oldham as their manager.
Yes.
And with recording and everything. And Mick phoned me up one day and said, "Oh, we're in the studio and Andrew's like you to do, do you fancy coming along to do, make a record?"
Because by that time you'd been doing backing.
No,
vocals?
not really.
Not
Only
even
ever,
that?
rehearsing. So I never actually performed with them.
So he just took a gamble.
Yeah.
Why was that song chosen? It's a Phil Spector song.
Yeah, because Andrew, I believe, was worshipped Phil Spector.
Oh,
And in fact,
really?
Phil Spector was in the recording studio when we made it.
Really?
Yeah.
What did he
yeah.
think of your version?
I don't know. I never asked him. I just did the number and then went back, I think, to school or something. I can't
One
remember.
take?
Yeah.
Okay, who else is on that record, Cleo?
Brian Jones, Keith Richard, Bill Wyman,
What are they doing?
Charlie Watts.
What are they doing on your record?
They were, and then Dada. They were all singing in the background
They're
as well.
your,
They were playing.
the Stones are your backing vocalists.
I know, it's hard to imagine, isn't it? Yeah.
And you also had the Andrew Loog Oldham Orchestra,
Yeah.
which let's face it.
It's a way to make some.
Yes, but they were just session musicians?
That was probably the Stones.
And look, this has always intrigued me because there's Cleo's song. What's on the B-side? It's not Cleo. So there's a completely different group. It's the Andrew Oldham Orchestra on the other side. Was this some kind of scam as well to make more money?
Probably, but I've never had any money for it.
Why?
I don't know, because I never had a contract or anything. It was just,
That was how it was done in those days.
In those days, yeah. And you were honourable.
Yes. Huh. Well, I bought one copy. Did anyone else?
I think, it got into London. It got in the sort of charts in London, for what it's worth. And it's been on compilations of the Stones since then.
But still, you've had no
So I still have
money.
no money. And in fact, I could do with it now because, I can't afford to buy my house.
Look,
yeah, that would
I can tell you,
that would be a nice little.
it would be handy. I can tell you now that this record now goes for, the top price is 40 quid.
It's not going to.
We'd have to sell quite a
few, wouldn't I?
few to buy your house.
Yeah.
But anything's possible. You've got to tell me, Cleo, about the pop music industry in those days.
Well, I will tell you one thing, that when I made my record, Jimmy Savile played it. And everybody said to me, if ever you if he invites you into his caravan, don't go.
No.
And I was so innocent that I didn't even know what they were talking about.
But this is 1964.
Yeah. So it was, and I've got a letter from him with all his fancy note paper.
Yes.
Saying, "Oh, keep making records" or something like that.
Oh, you could sell that maybe.
Well,
would you want to?
Would you want to? Exactly.
No.
Yeah.
How close were you to the Stones? Because there's a picture that always comes up of them carrying you down the street.
On Maddox Street.
Is it Maddox Street?
Yeah.
Where's that?
That's off Regent Street, opposite Liberties.
Of course.
Yeah.
So that was a publicity shot.
That was, and one of Andrew's publicity shots.
Did you stay in touch?
No, but the funny thing is, it's been quite weird because I was very friendly with Brian and his then girlfriend Linda, and she had his baby, one of many, so she had a baby to him, and then they split up anyway, and she went to America and stayed there for a few years. Meanwhile, she came back to England, married Donovan.
Oh yes.
And
this is the British Bob Dylan.
Yeah. Anyway, and I'd often thought about Linda because, as I said, they were always around at my mum's council flat. My mum used to cook for them and everything. And I often thought, I wonder what's happened to Linda. And I saw she'd married Donovan. And then I thought, it's another life and everything. So I never, sort of pursued getting in touch with her. Then about 7 years ago, I was coming home from a party and my phone went, "Hi, Cleo, I don't know if you remember me. It's Linda." And the odd thing is that just before he died, Brian had rung me up because he'd left the Stones. He was about to form a new band. He'd been to Morocco, heard all these amazing musicians and everything, and asked me if I'd be the singer with his band. And I'd said, "Oh, Brian, don't be silly," thinking, my God, I can't, with all those amazing musicians. But next thing I knew, he died. So to me, it was unfinished business.
We're going to talk more about Brian Jones and pop music in the 1960s in just a moment. But first, we're going to take a brief break to see a trailer for a Peccadillo release, and it's for a film called Carmen and Lola. A love story from Spain, and it's now available on peccadillopod.com. Have a look at this and join us again in a couple of minutes.
Perdona, guapa, ¿me deja unos plásticos? ¿Qué pasa, que tú no tienes novio, no?
No, ni quiero.
¿Tenías que irte al curso que tenías ensayo?
Ya, pero estoy estudiando, mamá.
¡En el nombre de Jesús!
¡Amén! Déjala que estudie, que tenga una vida mejor.
Ya sabe escribir, sabe de cuentas.
Siempre estás con lo mismo, nada más quieres que me case.
¿Sabes que dentro no me va a pedir?
Esa, mira, están allí.
Esta es su hija, Lola.
Ah, o sea, tu prima ya la conozco yo.
Estás muy guapo.
Igualmente. Si tú nunca te has besado con ninguna chica, ¿cómo sabes que te gusta?
¿Y tú?
Tú eres diferente, tú tienes cojones para salir de aquí. ¿Qué quieres, que me case con alguien que yo no quiera? ¿Qué pasa, que solo os importa el dinero?
Por favor, los vecinos, mira que da vergüenza. Cállate, por favor, te lo pido.
¿Qué vamos a hacer?
Pues querernos.
That's Carmen and Lola. It's from Spain. That opened in 2018 at the London Film Festival at BFI South Bank, which is just over there. But it's now on peccadillopod.com. Have a look at it. I'm David McGillivray. I'm here on London's South Bank with my guest Cleo Sylvestre, and we're talking about pop music in the 1960s. You were, what, of all the Rolling Stones, you were closest to Brian Jones?
Yeah. You are evil.
Why this pause?
I was close to Mick.
Okay. When you say close, will this all be in your autobiography, perhaps?
I'm not writing an autobiography.
I wish you would.
Might write little snippets of things.
So how much can we say about you and the Stones?
Well, I mean, Mick used to come round to my mum's flat as well, because in those days they had no money.
She would cook for them.
Yeah,
Your
she'd
mum
cook for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And other pop stars as well, I believe.
Oh yeah, Jimmy Page. Yeah. Who else? Oh yeah, Roger Daltrey.
The Hollies.
Oh, that's right. Yes, the Hollies. Brian brought them round. Two of them, Graham Nash and oh God.
Oh, who another member of the Hollies, please.
Yeah.
Stephen, you know everything.
Outside my field of knowledge, I'm afraid.
Graham Nash.
He wasn't born. I ought to know this
You should
because
know.
I
should
remember.
know.
Oh, but it's ebbed away.
Anyway.
But we'll Google it afterwards.
Yeah, and he came round one night, and I was actually in bed revising. I had my hair in rollers, and my mum said, Cleo, Brian's here with some friends. So she saw them into the sitting room, and I quickly got dressed and undid my rollers. And
goodness.
I don't know why I used to roll my hair. It's bizarre. Anyway, and but my mum at the time was doing evening classes at pottery, and they were lovely because they kept on asking if they could buy her pottery because they liked it. Yeah.
Have you still got some of it?
Some of her pottery. Yeah.
Good.
I have.
We were saying just before the break that Brian Jones asked you to join his new band.
That's
what
right.
I didn't know at the time was that he'd been fired from the Stones.
Yeah.
He asked you to join the new band. It never happened because his death was quite soon after that, wasn't it?
Yeah. But then we roll forward to Linda getting in touch with me, 7 years ago, whenever it was. And it transpires that she had a son to Brian. And his son, so in fact Brian's grandson, is a blues guitarist. So we've, because I've now, just before my 70th birthday, I decided that I've always loved blues music and I'd never actually done it. I'd spent my entire career acting. And I thought, I don't want to be one of those people, on your deathbed thinking, I wish I'd done this.
Yes.
So I thought, well, why not? I knew lots of musicians. So I formed a blues band, Honeybee Mama and Friends.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that because we are definitely going to talk about your band in just a minute.
Yeah.
But while we're on the subject, you have appeared in, I think, at least one documentary about Brian Jones.
Yeah.
There's one running at the moment on the Smithsonian Channel. There are now a lot of conspiracy theories about his death. We'll just let him go by. There he goes. What is your take on Brian Jones's death?
I don't know. I mean, I really, I wasn't party to that part, to that part. I wasn't part of that party or anything. And I don't know all the shenanigans going on beforehand.
And nobody
so
does.
I remain sort of, neutral really on that.
we've got to talk about some of your other stuff that you did at the same sort of time as you were Cleo making your debut on the Decca label. Now this I've got to mention because we just brought my cameraman Stephen into this conversation. I have to tell you now that he alerted me to one of your appearances. He is a big Doctor Who fan. He is now holding up a shot of you in The Warlords. It's a very early episode from 1965. Whatever you tell us about this episode, Cleo, is going to be new because we've got no other information. It's been wiped like that episode of Ready, Steady, Go.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Trying to say something.
No, a lot of your stuff has survived. We don't have to worry unduly. What do you remember about working with the first Doctor Who, William Hartnell?
Actually, it was such a long time ago.
Yes.
I really, haven't got any anecdotes. Alas.
And in those days, Doctor Who wasn't exactly the cult it is now.
No, it wasn't.
Stephen here has been to a Doctor Who event at the BFI South Bank, just here, only a couple of weeks ago. They were showing old episodes, but not as old as the one you were in. But do you now sign photos like the one you just were shown?
Yeah,
you do.
yeah. I've done those conventions where you do
have.
signings. Yeah.
I wondered if you did.
Yeah.
But even though you've got no memory of appearing on the show.
Well, I remember I played a belly dancer.
You're listed as a concubine. Is it the same thing?
Well, I was sort of who.
Did you do a bit of movement?
I think I did a bit of movement, yes.
Okay, but no lines,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
such a few.
Oh, you did?
Something about wanting. I wouldn't. Wanting money. Yes, I probably was a concubine.
Oh yes, it's all coming back to you now. Do you regret that stuff like this is not available? That is now being wiped?
Well, it's a shame in a way. I mean, you might get repeat fees.
Oh yes, I didn't think of that.
Yes.
Maybe it can be recreated because some of these episodes have been.
And maybe somebody's attic.
Yeah. Now it's
knows?
always a possibility. Now, also in that episode was an actor called William Russell, and he is still alive. He's coming up for 98, I think. Do you remember him? I had to ask. Just wondered. Now, also you've done a lot of soaps. Corrie and Zcars, but we want to talk specifically about Crossroads because now, is it true you were the first black actor in a recurring role in a soap?
I think I probably was for sort of British born.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you remember of Crossroads?
I remember. How long you got?
Good.
I remember that I was in a television programme called Some Women, which was written by somebody called Tony Parker, and it was verbatim accounts of women who'd been in prison. And I played a 17-year-old who had ended up in Holloway through no fault of her own, purely because she was in foster care and children's homes, and she kept on running away. And eventually, the only way the system could deal with her was to put her in prison. Now, it was produced by Tony Garnett, the wonderful Tony Garnett, and Roy Battersby directed it. Now, the BBC were confused because they said people might think we're real people, so they wouldn't put it out. I think there were other sort of slightly political reasons as well. So for 2 years, this was on hold. Eventually, I think Tony Garnett showed it to a group of people, including, I think, Ken Tynan and George Melly, who did a big write-up about it in the paper. Why isn't this shown? They snuck it out really late at night, you know, the latest possible. And who should be watching but Reg Watson, who was the producer of Crossroads.
Aha.
So the next day I get a phone call, my agent gets a phone call from from Reg saying, you know, we'd love her to be in Crossroads, would she like to come up and have a look at the studios? So I went up there and saw Susan Hanson that I sort of vaguely knew and everything, which was lovely, and decided to go to join it.
Where was this shot in those days?
Birmingham.
Birmingham.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
was it as haphazard as it's rumoured to be? It's rumoured also that Acorn Antiques was largely based on Crossroads.
Well, it was. I mean, considering we were doing how many? I think in those days, I think we were doing five a week.
Yes.
You know, and
Was it
just
live?
the turnover, yeah. So sometimes, you know, Reg, who's lovely man, would come up before the break or just after, during the break, and say, "Oh, Cleo, we're running a bit under.
Yeah.
Could you just improvise for a little?" So you'd be on the phone saying, "Oh, yes, Crossroads Motel." You know, you'd make up some little sort of thing, and then you see the floor manager going like that, you know, to wind it up.
Did you find that exciting?
It was, and it you know, it really sort of taught me quite a lot about telly in a way. It was like an actor doing rec, you know, for theatre.
And we now know as well, because you just mentioned the name Tony Garnett, how you came in touch with Ken Loach. You did 2 TV films for him.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, were they any different in those days from average television? Did you know while you were working on Cathy Come Home and Up the Junction that these were going to be very special and we'd still be talking about them today?
No, I think we knew that because most of us in it were quite sort of, well, I was particularly left wing, and I think we felt, you know, these were subjects which needed to be addressed and needed to be broadcast, but in no way did I ever dream that, you know,
it would have Cathy Come Home would have the effect it did.
No,
really,
no. And
what an honour to be part of that film.
Yeah, and I was in the Poor Cow as well.
Yes,
the film.
Oh, now while we're talking about films, I've got to move from the sublime to the literally ridiculous, because I wonder if she can guess what I'm going to mention. A lot of people are going to want to have your take on this, Cleo. You were in Joan Crawford's last film.
Well, actually, it was quite an experience. You can imagine, you know, she was incredible. She knew everybody's name on that set.
I'd heard that.
She was unbelievable, and I was still living at home then in my mum's council flat in Euston.
Yes.
And one of the Clapper boys, he actually lived on the same estate, and he said to me, you know, she knows, you know, it was true.
It's true.
And then not long after we'd finished filming, as this letter came, I got this letter, and there was embossed on the back of the envelope, JC, and I thought, who's been writing to me? Jesus Christ, you know. And then I opened it up, and it said, "Oh, Cleo dear, thank you so much for being so wonderful. I did enjoy meeting you. Do hope we work together again soon.
Have you still got it?"
And I thought to Joan, who have I been working with?
Yeah.
Called Joan. Of course, never thinking. Of course, it was Joan Crawford. And then after that, she, I've got quite a few of her letters. She would send me, you know, Christmas cards or Easter cards. You know, this time of the year, I'd like to extend the hand of friendship across the ocean. But she wrote, you know.
She liked writing letters.
Yeah.
The film we're talking about is called Trog. Yeah. The critics were not kind to it.
No.
I'm going to leave that one with you. What do you remember of it?
that she was very gracious.
She was nice.
Yeah.
And what
yeah.
about the film? Have you seen it?
Oh, many moons ago. It's not.
It's very, very special. I haven't seen it since it came out in 1970. The word had got out by that time that this film wasn't particularly good, and I remember all the critics cramming into one of those little preview theatres in Wardour Street because everyone wanted to see this film they'd heard so much about, and they were brutal. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's Trog. Now, I'm now going to ask you some very big questions, Cleo. Yes, I'm afraid so. Firstly, did the swinging 60s ever really exist?
Oh yes. Yes. I mean, it was. You have to remember that we were the children of the first sort of post-war generation. So having sort of been brought up playing on bomb sites and, you know, monochrome clothes and everything, suddenly there was this explosion. It was amazing. And I think I was very lucky to have been around at that time, actually, because I'd hate to be around. I'd hate to be starting, you know, a teenager now. Actually.
Now, there's a link here to my next question, because you've played quite a few nurses in your time. When you look at the opportunities that are now for black actors, do you wish that you'd been born just a little bit later?
From that point of view, maybe yes, because, for example, I've always loved restoration comedy.
Yes.
And I would have loved to. I've never done restoration comedy. I've been in Jacobean, but and I've, you know, done Shakespeare. But I think now those opportunities, you know, are available. But regarding the general, you know, do I want to live in this sort of grabbing society with all sorts of horrible things happening to the world, both, you know, politically and environmentally, then, you know, I'm glad that you know.
You wouldn't want to be young today.
No.
You and me both, Cleo, actually, yes.
I think I'm glad I'm on the way out, actually.
Oh.
Seriously?
No, I won't hear anything about that, Cleo. On the way out, hardly. I mean, look at her. When were you happiest?
Oh dear. Right now.
Oh, schmoozer. Why won't you write an autobiography? You've got so many stories.
I know, but some, you know, it's quite painful, I think, you know, if you're being honest, a lot of it, you know, would be quite painful to revisit.
Couldn't you just write about the fun stuff?
I suppose, but then
because
it wouldn't,
you're a good writer as well. This has got to be mentioned.
Oh,
true.
Well, but I don't know. I might do. I've started doing musings.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Little short stories about your life.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
I want you to predict something now, Cleo. What is theatre going to be like post-COVID?
Oh, well, there'll be, I should imagine, a lot more, I think, mixed media stuff, I would have thought. And I don't know, a lot of one woman and one person shows.
True.
No, maybe post-COVID. Actually, they won't have the restrictions, so hopefully there'll be lots of, you know, big, like, well, you know, we've got 14 in our cast.
My. And
which
yes,
is great. So.
by the time this goes out, the big musicals will have reopened.
Yeah.
So life will be kind of back to normal again.
Yeah.
And while we're sitting here, there's a Goodyear blimp
Yeah, I've seen it all.
above us.
Just keep seeing it, actually.
It just goes backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
We're never going to finish everything, as I said on YouTube. We are going to move on to Patreon in just a moment, but before we do, I just want to mention something about another of your careers, because you were the artistic director of a little fringe theatre called the Rosemary branch.
That's right.
So
indeed.
it's still going happily, isn't it?
It is.
It is. In Islington, in North London. How did that come about, Cleo?
That came about because I have a friend, a neighbour, who was a dance teacher. She and her husband bought this pub, and my husband died, and I was left with 3 young children. And she said to me one day, "Look, I'm fed up with the way the theatre's been run. I'm fed up with," she was teaching dance. "Why don't you and I run the theatre?" And for me, it was ideal because it was literally 2 streets away, 3 streets away from where I lived. So it meant I didn't have long journeys, to and from work, and I could go off and do my acting when it turned up. And it was great, and to give the opportunity for younger, actors. We made sure that we paid people, because we didn't have any rent to pay because she owned the pub. It was,
And you did that for
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
We're going to continue that on Patreon. We've got lots more time on there. So right now, alas, I'm going to wind this up on YouTube and thank my special guest, Cleo Sylvestre, very much indeed.
Thank you, David.
Lovely stories, Cleo. Thank you so much. We're moving on to Patreon. Here's the link again in case you're not a subscriber. Join me again next week here on YouTube, when my guest will be journalist Tony Dalton, who has just written a book about the Hammer horror director Terence Fisher. Were you ever in a Hammer film, Cleo?
I would love to have been. I would love to have been.
Me too. We missed out there.
Yeah.
Join me again, as I say, next week. Until then, mwah. Bye.
Bye.